Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Shrivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Shrivaradhari Yashoda Jana Amunati Ramanachari Yamunati Ramanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Vrajanarandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Swayam Rupa Kadam Him Kadam Sukadam Shri Guru Shri Gauravani Pracharya Ashyata Vishya Jai Shri Krishna Srivasadi Guru Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Narasimhaya Namaste Jaste Jase Avir Bhava Vajranaka Vajradam Shakrmashim Gandhaya Randhaya Tamo Visam Swaha Abhayam Om Shiva Vidasya Sime Kaman Varam Stam Varasharshana Kamanam Hrideshram Roham Avatastu Gnevaram Evam Janam Nipatitam Prabhavai Kupe Kama Vikama Pramadam Prasanga Ritvatmasat Surashina Bhagavan Soham Katam Rupsichetam Bhritya Seva Hare Krishna devotees are able to hear me so that I can continue to read. Some devotees said that voice was breaking. So how is the voice now? Are you able to hear properly? Hare Krishna. Are you able to hear properly? Prabhuji's and Mataji's. Hare Krishna. What is echoing and breaking? Now you are able to hear me? Now I have. Hare Krishna. Properly, what is the point in continuing? Hare Krishna, please message me. Are you able to hear me? Because today we are shifting our place from Bharuch to some other place. So my computer, everything devotees have taken. So I'm doing my live on this laptop and through the hotspot. That's why some technical difficulties. Are you able to hear me now? Hare Krishna. Not clear, Prabhuji. Chandra, how? Oh, baby in background. That baby is nearby our house. Hare Now how is the voice? Okay. Sorry, devotees, you have come so long waiting for reading, but today it's because of so many reasons. Now the voice is better, I suppose. Okay. I will start reading. Yes, thank you. So we will start from page number 2. Okay. Reading from the book Brahmacharya and Krsna Consciousness, page number, written by His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami Maharaj, published by Bhakti Vikas Trust, and dedicated to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta. Page number 8, 6. The cause of unlimited suffering. Of all kinds of suffering and bondage arising from various attachments, none is greater than suffering and bondage arising from attachment to women and intimate contact with those attached to women. Because the experience and urges of sex are so intense and the syndrome of man-woman relationships surrounding it is so complex, it diverts the conditioned soul's attention away from Krishna and deludes him more than any other trick of Maya. Sometimes the foolish conditioned soul experiences great delight in enjoying sex. At other times, he is frustrated and burns in the fire of lust. Or when spooned by lover, he suffers mental agony, sometimes so severe that he is driven to kill the loved one, or himself or both. The loss of a partner to whom one is intimately emotionally attached by death or other means leaves the remaining partner with a broken heart. And especially in our most abominably degraded modern society, thousands of people's lives become shattered by having their bodies exploited, either forcefully or tactfully by others. The greatest myth in human society is that sex is the cause of happiness, and that by adjusting or increasing one's sex life, one can find happiness. Factually, the opposite is true. The more one becomes involved in sex, the more he becomes entangled by the complexities of the actions and reactions of material life. This ultimately leads the unrestricted enjoyer to take birth in animal kingdom, where he is awarded improved facilities to carry on with his sexual activities and with minimal restrictions. Birth after birth, he can enjoy 84 lakh species of sex to his heart's content. He will also experience varieties of birth, death, old age, and disease, and he will never be happy. The much advertised pleasure of sex is more fantasized about than real. People assume that sex will bring them pleasure, but the actual act is over in a few minutes and gives far less sensual gratification than was imagined in the mind. In the long run, it brings much more trouble than enjoyment. On the physical platform also, sex is debilitating and can be dangerous. Sexual enjoyers forget that the body, which is vehicle of sexual pleasure, is also the vehicle of pain, disease, and death. It takes the essence of 60 drops of blood to make one drop of semen. Furthermore, much subtle life energy, prana, is lost in sex life. Rapid breathing during sex also shortens one's life, for the number of breaths a person will have in his lifetime is fixed at birth. Therefore, yogis practice breath restraint to prolong their lives. Then there is danger of sexually transmitted diseases, which is extremely painful and lusty and nasty. Furthermore, to the extent that a person becomes interested in sex, that much he loses all good qualities. For from lust develop all other bad qualities such as greed, personal ambition, hatred, and cruelty. Srila Prabhupada. Sex life is the background of materialism. Demons are very fond of sex life. The more one is freed from the desire for sex, the more he is promoted to the level of demigods. The more one is inclined to enjoy sex, the more he is degraded to the level of demonic life. A lusty person becomes not only keenly interested in sexual enjoyment, but in all other forms of sense gratification also. Although such people may generally appear to act fairly reasonably, actually they are all self-centered and selfish. They are after what they can get for themselves. The Srimad Bhagavatam therefore analyzes that non-devotees have no good qualities, even though they may appear to. They are simply suffering and causing others to suffer in a mesh of greed, envy, and mutual exploitation, with such a veneer of social civility. This is especially evident in today's me first generation, a whole society, raised on consumeristic greed and lust, with no higher moral than get what you can grab. Okay, for the time being, I would like to request some other devotees, because some devotees want my help regarding entering the sessions, so I would help them. So in between some other devotees, I would request Vivek to read. I've given access to Vivek. So
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Vivek, are you there?
Prabhu, is it audible? Hare Krishna Prabhu. Prabhu, is it audible, Prabhu?
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Able to hear me?
Your voice is cutting, Prabhu. Not clear. Shall I continue? Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Prabhu, shall I continue?
Hare,
Is my voice audible, Prabhu?
you continue, Prabhuji.
Sex, fascination, the disease of the modern age. Sex is the Sex is the overwhelming obsession of modern society. Sexual promiscuity is so unrelentingly stressed that anyone who does not appear to be highly interested in it is generally considered to be a crank. Social pressure induces people to try to maintain juvenile lustiness long after the sensual high of youth has subsided. Thus, millions of people remain emotionally immature all their lives. It is a sick world. Ignorant of their relationship with Krishna and unsure of their status in rapidly changing societies with no fixed values, people desperately desire an identity, an image of themselves which they feel good with and which others respect. The essence of image, as inculcated by the mass media, is sexual attractiveness. The power of the media to mold people's attitudes and behavior is a pathetic but documented fact. Even if the average person's mind would not have been always observed in sexual thoughts, the media makes sure it is. The advertising industry in particular churns out unending pictures of dressed up or undressed women in magazines, on billboards, on television, always and everywhere. Despite grossly exploiting the bodies of women and the basest impulses of men solely for the sake of making some already over rich people even richer, their activities continue for the most part unquestioned. The general public absorb their propaganda and remain ever steeped in lust, having no knowledge of the necessity to resist. Thus, advertisements oozing with sexual overtones allure the willingly gullible public to mindlessly purchase everything from the back scrubbers to brandy. And the consumer society rolls on, its members forever sexually jacked up. Constant titillation of the senses, however, increasingly dulls the spirit. Thus, despite all the celluloid promises, people find themselves cheated of real happiness. In adolescence, when the senses appear to have unlimited power to invoke euphoric delights, happiness through sense enjoyments seems not only to be a distinct possibility, but the very meaning of life. But the pleasures of youth, as the poets lament, is but a fleeting frolic. The ability of the body to enjoy is like a water-laden sponge. At first, if you just pinch it, water gushes out. But as it is squeezed more and more, it gradually becomes difficult to get even a few drops from it. Similarly, attempts for sexual enjoyment increasingly result in emptiness and frustration. Still, most people fail to recognize the limits of sexual enjoyment. Due to misdirected education, they think that their lack of satisfaction with sex means there is something wrong in their approach to it. They may end up on a psychologist's couch or reading some of the hundreds of books on improved sex life, yoga for sex, Tao for sex, the modern woman's guide to a sex, a doctor's sex secrets, diet for better sex, etc. However, the harder they grope for pleasure, the more surely it eludes them. As they furiously try to force their bodies into giving them the happiness which they regard as a natural birthright, they may turn to frequent masturbation, increased promiscuity, pornography, varieties of perversity, and ultimately violence. Actual civilization teaches its members to sublimate their sexual desires for higher spiritual purposes. Modern civilization exploits people's sexual cravings, makes a business out of it, and sends people to hell by the millions. Seeing all this, the Vaishnavas are sorry. They know that every living being is an eternal servant of Krishna, and that sexual desire is simply a perverted reflection of the heart's deepest longings to love Krishna. Just by understanding this simple principle, the whole world could be happy. But in the darkness of the modern age, it is very difficult to convince anyone that there is anything wrong with the sex at all. The members of the Krishna consciousness movement have a great responsibility to somehow or other give this real knowledge to the people of the world. Srila Prabhupada. The Krishna consciousness movement will go down in history as having saved mankind in its darkest hour. Sense gratification. The idea that we can achieve happiness through the enjoyment of our senses, especially through that prototype of all pleasure, sex, and sexual love, is an illusion which is perhaps the most deeply rooted and pervasive of all human convictions. With the disintegration of traditional religions and the official establishment of secular philosophies, this illusion has gained the force of an obsession. Sex desire is based on the touch sensation. It is a topmost pleasure in and therefore the main binding force of the material world. But there are five other senses also: the senses of seeing, smelling, tasting, hearing, and the mind. Any one of them can carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. Furthermore, each sense has many desires to be fulfilled. The pull of the senses is very strong and dangerous. However, there is no real enjoyment in sense gratification. On the contrary, there is built-in pain in material pleasure. Happiness is derived from a combination of the senses and the sense objects. It is always a cause of distress. And as one's body engages in sense gratification, it becomes weaker and weaker daily. Real pleasure means Krishna consciousness, the happiness of the soul. The so-called pleasure of the material life is simply an illusory construction of the mind. As for the agitations of the flickering mind, they are divided into two divisions. The first is called avirodha priti or unrestricted attachment, and the other is called virodha yukta krodha, anger arising from frustration. Adherence to the philosophy of the Mayavadis, belief in the fruitive results of the Karmavadis, and the belief in the plans based on materialistic desires are called avirodha priti. Jnanis, karmis, and materialistic plan makers generally attract the attention of conditioned souls, but when the materials cannot fulfill their plans and when their devices are frustrated, they become satisfaction of the mind can be obtained only by taking the mind away from the thoughts of sense enjoyment. The more the mind dwells on sense gratification, the more it is dissatisfied. Understanding this, the transcendentalist undergoes tapasya, austerity, giving up the sense gratification. But even giving up sense gratification by practicing the rules and regulations of the spiritual life is not enough. We also have to give up meditating on the sense gratification. Unless and until we completely give up all hope of trying to enjoy this material world, we will not be able to firmly fix our intelligence. We will have ups and downs and will not taste the true bliss of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada, if our mind is filled with the sense gratification, even though we want Krishna consciousness, by continuous practice, we cannot forget the subject of sense gratification. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is stated that if someone sincerely wants to see the Lord and at the same time wants to enjoy this material world is considered to be a fool only. Therefore, it is the duty of the transcendentalist to try strenuously to control desire. So, shall I continue?
Which page are you?
13, Prabhu, 13.
Why? Because the internet got disconnected, so that's why I didn't.
Yeah, I can hear a
You
lot of
completed
disturbance.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, what to do? Sorry. Actually, thing is, here I don't have internet. I'm adjusting with some. I don't have proper headphone also. Uh, restricting with association with women. You come. You start. You about to start that?
I still not started, Prabhu. If you permit, I can start.
Okay. Okay. No problem. You can read that. Yeah, you can continue.
Shall I continue, bro?
Yes, Prabhu, you can. Yes, Prabhu, you can continue.
Okay. Restricting association with women. Since the dawn of history, materialists have written thousands of books about dealing with women, and it is still a mystery to them. Especially if women are accepted as sense objects, relationships with them remain inextricably complex. Nectar in the beginning, poison in the end. The brahmachari has no real business associating with women. Whatever must be there, he keeps as brief as possible. He knows that the male human form is meant for self-realization and that attraction to the female form blocks such spiritual advancement. Therefore, the Vedic culture has always carefully restricted the mixing of men and women. Most of the time, traditional brahmacharis wouldn't see women at all, as they would be busy with the studies. Addressing all women as Mata, the only relationship they might have was with their guru's wife, who is, in the absence of the real mother, would look after the boys. Even then, there were restrictions, especially after the boys reached puberty and if the wife was young. Brahmacharis would not even see any young woman for the first 25 years of their lives. Vanaprasthas kept the company of their aging wives under strict vows, but for sannyasis, association with women was meant to be zero. Even grihasthas were only allowed limited association. Free mixing with women was only for Shudras and outcasts, that is, those with no higher values of life. For those interested in spiritual advancement, association with women must be restricted to the minimum. In the presence of women, the consciousness of a man changes. Even if several serious brahmacharis are present in a room and a chaste devotee woman enters for some reason, the mentality of the men, consciously or unconsciously, will change. They will become self-conscious in their words and actions. So, even having philosophically accepted that we are all spirit souls, and even if we want to be liberal and forget the formalities and relate to women on a person to person basis, the Shastra forbids us to do so. As long as a living entity is not completely self realized, as long as he is not independent of the misconception of identifying with his body, which is nothing but a reflection of the original body and senses, he cannot be relieved of the conception of duality, which is epitomized by the duality between man and woman. Thus, there is every chance that he will fall down because his intelligence is bewildered. In the purport to this verse, Srila Prabhupada elaborates, one must realize perfectly that the living being is a spirit soul and is tasting various types of material bodies. One may theoretically understand this, but when one has practical realization, then he becomes a pandita, one who knows. Until that time, the duality continues and the conception of man and woman also continues. In this stage, one should be very careful in mixing with women. No one should think himself perfect and forget the Shastric injunction that one should be careful about associating even even with his daughter, mother, or sister, not to speak of other women. In Krishna consciousness, man is good and woman is good. But in conditional stage, the combination is always dangerous. Better to be careful than sorry. Even in the short history of ISKCON, we have seen many stalwart, sincere devotees, including sannyasis, fall down because of carelessness and complacency in dealing with women. In our Krishna consciousness movement, it is advised that the sannyasis and brahmacharis keep strictly aloof from the association of women so that there will be no chance of their falling down again as victims of lusty desires. The material world is so designed that unless one goes to the jungles or mountains, he must have some dealings with the opposite sex. In the modern world, there is no protection for the brahmacharis. Man woman relationships are quite free, which is the beginning of all hellish life and quite unsuitable for spiritual progress. ISKCON brahmacharis have to deal with women, both devotees and non-devotees, a lot more than traditional brahmacharis did, and is less favorable circumstances. Dealings with women should be a formal, polite, and as little as possible. If some talk must be there, keep your distance, stand well apart, avoid eye contact, and finish the business as soon as possible. Never get into argument with a woman. Strict brahmacharis do not attend the marriage ceremonies, watch dramas with parts played by women, or see women dancing or hear their singing. The general principle to avoid intimate association must be strictly maintained. It is foolish to think that one can freely mix with the opposite sex and remain unagitated. Even the great brahmachari Bhishmadeva expressed that he could not save himself if he were to associate with young girls. Nor should brahmacharis accept service from women. Even prasada service should be separate. It is especially dangerous for a brahmachari to see and talk to the same woman repeatedly. Once a friendly relationship is established, the downfall of the brahmachari has begun. Remember, women are powerful. Caesar controlled a mighty empire, but Cleopatra controlled Caesar. Of course, having to speak with women or sometimes discuss something with them is unavoidable. If at all possible, mold your life in such a way that you don't normally have to have any dealings with women. The tendency should be towards zero dealings. Brahmachari should avoid physically touching women, for to do so even accidentally will agitate the mind. Keep at least far enough away so that there is not even a possibility of brushing against a woman's clothing, and preferably further still. Lord Chaitanya, even in his householder life, would stand well to side if he saw a woman approaching on the path. Nor did he joke with women. Brahmachari should follow the Lord's example. The eyes have a tendency to stray toward women, but this should be given up. When a man looks at women, the Cupid, Kamadeva, standing nearby with his flower bow, immediately shoots an arrow called Mohana, meaning infatuation, delusion, or folly, which causes the man to be fascinated by the female form. After this preliminary bewilderment, Cupid sends a further 4 arrows, namely Stambhana, which turns the man and causes him to forget all else. Unmadana, which causes him to be as if intoxicated. Shochana, which causes intense attraction. And Tapana, which deeply pierces the heart and causes it to burn. Hardly anyone in the three worlds has the power to resist the influence of these arrows. Maya is so strong that even in the midst of an enlivening kirtana, a devotee engaged in chanting the pure names of Supreme Lord may become attracted upon seeing the form of the opposite sex, especially a dancing form. Therefore, a brahmachari should practice not looking at women and should especially never see a woman dressing, combing her hair, running, playing sports, sleeping, bathing, undressed or partially dressed. Never trust the mind. The mind will tell us, I can speak to this woman, I won't get agitated. She is only a child, or she is much older than me, so no problem. Or she is the chaste wife of so and so. Or anyway, I know the philosophy. I'm not going to speak to her for long. It's important. And I'm not going to fall down. But Shastra states that what to speak of lusty rascals brought up in the modern sex-centered so-called civilization. Even learned scholars of the Vedic age were totally forbidden from sitting close to their mother, sister, or daughter. Such a chaste behavior helps to control the mind. The natural tendency to be lusty is checked by deliberate restraint in dealings with the opposite sex. As soon as one even slightly indulges in looking at, unnecessarily talking with, or in any way behaving loosely with women, then the god is let down and lusty desires begin to enter. Soon the intelligence becomes bewildered, and being impelled by the senses, one cannot distinguish between activities that are beneficial and those that should be avoided. One who loses control of his mind loses control of his life and becomes controlled by Maya in the form of a woman. Therefore, a brahmachari must be careful to control his mind and senses and not indulge them in the illusory pleasure derived from seeking, thinking about, or talking with women. The mind and the senses are so strong that they can never, never, never be trusted. The only thing they can be trusted to do is to sell us off to Maya if given even a shadow of an opportunity. One slip into illicit sex will cause havoc in the life of a devotee. Such strong scriptures may seem odd in the context of modern social relationships, but the fact is that unless this discrimination between the sexes is re established, there is no hope for human society. A civilization that allows men to mix unrestrictedly with women is an animal civilization. In Kali Yuga, people are extremely liberal, but mixing with women and talking with them as equals actually constitutes an uncivilized way of life. The scriptures enjoin that we see all women as our mother. That's a healthy approach for a brahmachari. Even if most women, due to lack of training, don't act like mothers. Don't try to impress women. We may not even be fully conscious of it, but when women are present, the tendency is to try to impress them by our good behavior, eloquent speaking, athletic dancing, or whatever. Be careful. However, fanatical anti womanism is also unhealthy. How many women hating, staunch brahmacharis have succumbed and become big enjoyer householders? The roughness of so-called super brahmacharis, as if unkindness and rudeness to women were proof of their freedom from sex desire, is actually indicative of their agitation. Indeed, undesirable traits such as the desire to dominate or impress others, unnecessary anger, and voracious eating are all symptoms of sex desire manifest in different ways. Attachment and rejection are two sides of the coin of the mode of passion. Neutrality and detachment born of sattvaguna are required of a steady devotee. One must come to the mode of goodness to maintain brahmacharya. In goodness, knowledge and renunciation develop. Our philosophy begins with Atma Gnana. We are not these bodies, male or female. So we shouldn't develop a superiority complex. I am a big renounced brahmachari. Who are these less intelligent women? Who knows possibly in our last lives we were in women's bodies and the women were in the men's bodies. Still, still we must keep the distinction. Danger, keep your distance. Don't be rough, don't be rude, but don't worry about being considered odd or antisocial by being distant. Better be safe than sorry.
Okay, Prabhuji. Okay, Prabhuji. I will give some other devotee to read.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Are you able to hear? Hare Krishna. Shivakumar. Hare Krishna, I think now you are able to hear me. This is so problematic today. My Wi-Fi is gone and I'm not able to. Hare Krishna, able to hear. Shivakumar Rajendran, you can read. Shivakumarji, you can accept the son and you can read. I'm not hearing voice. Hare Krishna. Guru Siddha Patil, I have given you the access. Yeah. Screen is frozen. Hare Krishna, Guru Siddha Patilji is out. Okay, Shivakumar Rajendran, I have given you the access. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Shivakumar Rajendranji, I have given you the access.
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Am I audible?
Shivakumar. Shivkumar, are you able to
Hare
hear me?
Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu, you can continue to read.
Okay, Prabhu. Attitudes in devotional service. One of the most important statements about Krishna consciousness is in Srila Prabhupada's preface to the Nectar of Instruction. Advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. Srila Prabhupada has stated that anyone can become a pure devotee of Krishna immediately if he simply desires to. Advancement in devotional service means to purify our desires, and pure devotional service means to be fully absorbed in serving Krishna without even the slightest desire for any personal sense gratification. Only the most fortunate people can come to Krishna consciousness. People come to devotional service for a variety of reasons. Some are seeking shelter from intense distress, others are looking for a simple alternative lifestyle. Some come out of curiosity to see what is all about, some because they want a cleaner, better life for themselves and their families. Some are directly searching for God and the meaning of life. Of course, real devotional service is completely unmotivated, even by desires for peace and holistic well being. Only such a surrendered attitude can bring complete satisfaction to the self. Those who are most intelligent will, from the beginning of their practice of Krishna consciousness, sincerely endeavor to be pure devotees of Krishna. Such an attitude is always to be encouraged, for it is the essence of our movement. Others, however, may consider such an outlook to be utopian. How is it possible, they will postulate, for those coming from such sinful backgrounds to consider seriously the prospect of becoming pure devotees, completely free from all material desires? Better be realistic, they say. Make some compromise with Maya and continue at some level of Krishna consciousness. Of course, everyone is encouraged to begin devotional service at whatever level he finds convenient, and it is not expected that all will take to it fully from the very beginning. Indeed, the whole system of Varnashrama Dharma, which forms the basis of Vedic culture, is meant for the gradual elevation of materially contaminated persons who are willing to adopt some measure of Krishna consciousness into their lives but are not yet prepared for full surrender to Krishna. However, Srila Prabhupada's whole mood and that of Lord Chaitanya and of our entire Sampradaya is that Krishna consciousness is so easily available in this Kali Yuga by the easy process of chanting Hare Krishna. So, why not take full advantage of it, perfect our lives, and go back home, back to Godhead? Srila Prabhupada, don't think that this chanting and dancing will not lead to the desired goal. It will. It is the assurance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that one will get all perfection by this process. It is with this faith that brahmacharis engage in devotional activities. True brahmacharis strive for the mood of ahaituki ahaituki apratihata bhakti, constant engagement in devotional service without any personal motive. They are always eager for service and do not expect any special facilities or respect in return. Such pure devotional service is the ideal and essence of brahmachari life. Devotees who are not thus striving for perfection, who are executing mixed devotional service, may consider the prospect of becoming a pure devotee in this life to be impossible, especially those who were once thus endeavoring but who have fallen away from the strict standard of devotional service may even be cynical about the efforts of those devotees who continue to perform devotional service with enthusiasm. But we should know this for what it is. Maya. Just because someone has fallen away doesn't mean that everybody will fall away. The process of Krishna consciousness is perfect. If anybody follows it with sincerity and vigor and refuses to leave the path under any circumstances, his success is guaranteed. If anybody leaves this movement, it is not the fault of the process. It is the failure of the individual to surrender to it. We should be careful to avoid developing negative attitudes in our devotional life. After all, whatever difficulties the material energy throw at us, as she undoubtedly will to test our sincerity and fortitude, we always have cause for optimism because we are on the path back to Godhead. Srila Prabhupada, as long as a person is fully in cooperation with the wishes of the Lord, guided by the bona fide Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, and strictly following regulative principles, one has no cause for despondency, however trying the circumstances of life. So it is better to avoid the company of doubters and groaners and make our lifetime plans for serving Krishna within this moment. Why not? We have already come so far. We have turned our backs on materialistic values, shaved our heads, donned dhotis and tilaka, so why not go the whole way and surrender fully to Krishna? At least we should try for that. Srila Prabhupada gave the example that if a student makes the effort to pass an exam in the top grade, he will at least get a passing grade. But if he simply aims for a pass, he is likely to fail. So we should think, in this life I will end all association with this material world forever. I will attain Krishna consciousness. Often young brahmacharis, fresh from the grind of material life, are bursting with enthusiasm, but after some time they may lose that freshness. Srila Prabhupada noted that beginners in Krishna consciousness have a tendency to relax their efforts in a short time, but to advance spiritually, you must resist this temptation and continually increase your efforts and devotion. Young brahmacharis are usually trained strictly in the beginning, but after being in the movement a few years, when they become a little mature in devotional service, the pressure is often relaxed. It may be that no one is pushing them to surrender or to follow the temple programs diligently. At that time, the devotee's spiritual advancement will depend to a much greater extent on his own determination to apply himself to the process of Krishna consciousness. It is required that devotees become spiritually grown up, make a commitment to stay in this movement and go on practicing Krishna consciousness no matter what, and always endeavor to become an advanced devotee. Without sincere endeavor in devotional service, one cannot obtain love of Godhead. An easygoing life and attainment of perfection in transcendental realization cannot go together.
Okay, Prabhu.
Hare
Very
Krishna
good.
Prabhu, should I
Stop here.
continue? Okay, Prabhu.
Thank you. Sorry, devotees, if you are able to hear me, I'm very, very sorry. Today, because of my internet, so many problems happen, and devotees might have felt bored or developed. But definitely tomorrow we may not be having the session because of Nashinga Chaturdasi evening program. So we have evening program over here also. So maybe day after tomorrow we might meet. Okay. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Gita-nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavabhyo. Gita-nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavabhyo. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare. Hare Ram. Hare Ram. Ram Ram. Yeah. I said that tomorrow we may not be having the session because of Nashinga Chaturdasi's program in the evening. So day after tomorrow we might meet. So So tomorrow there won't be the session because tomorrow evening we have the program over here. I think it is audible. Yeah. After tomorrow I will arrange everything for the Wi-Fi connection and everything. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.